Hello everyone, welcome into the Coach KJ Carousel Dynasty. Today we are going to do our first offseason and we will get our first head coaching job as we're taking a look at the final top 25 rankings before I head into the offseason. You can see Alabama, Georgia, USC, and us at Penn State are your top four, followed by Washington at number 5. The rest of it's just after bowl week, how everything finished up and where teams finished with their final records. You had 5 teams drop out of the top 25 following bowl week, so there was a bit of turnover. And we did get offered an extension from Penn State. However, I decided to look on the carousel so that way I can try to become a head coach instead of taking that extension. And as you can see, the first head coaching job opens Clemson. We didn't even get an offer. We didn't get interviewed for this one. You can see we didn't finish in their top 6. It became Bill O'Brien. However, Florida is our top choice and they offered us the job. The suspense is over pretty quick in this episode. We're going to end up becoming the Florida Gators head coach. I am pumped to go to Florida and play and control the Gators. I'm a Gators fan in real life, so there's no way I could turn this down. They've really struggled under Coach Billy Napier, going 6-6 and 3-9. However, we all know Dan Mullen left a mess for him to take over. Breaking the dynasty file real quick and talking just real life, I think Gators fans need to be patient. It's hard, but this team has a lot of rebuilding to do. So the reality is Coach Billy Napier could struggle this year as well in real life. I don't think we should fire him if he does, but since they didn't here, I'm going to take this job, and it's my dream job, as you can see in the top left. It's the team I always wanted to take over, so we're going to get to it early. Now, I'm not going to stay here for the duration of this dynasty file. That's not the plan. We are going to have to move around a little bit and do some changes. Now, I am going to show off all the other head coaching changes that happened, just so that way you can see where people go. And I'm not a fan of every team in college football, but some of you may be interested in what's happening with your program, so you can see what's happened here and different changes that have been made and some of the people that got head coaching jobs. Illinois was another one I was really interested in going to. Honestly, if I didn't get offered that Gators one, I was going to take the Illinois one. I was pretty confident that that job was going to be offered to me, so that was kind of my plan, and I really thought going into it I was going to become Illinois head coach. But the Gators offered me the job and I couldn't turn it down. Nebraska was also on my list, but I just couldn't take that job. It felt a little cheap. I just wanted to rebuild them just because they were a blue blood program, and they're one that many people still remember as being a blue blood. It's just they're not there, and they haven't been there for most of my life. So it's disappointing for them to be so low, which is why I wanted to build them up. But Illinois was just so terrible, and I don't know, the challenge of taking over a team that's never been good really and making them great was something that appealed to me, so that's why I thought of going there. However, when I seen the Gators were likely going to fire their head coach, there was no way I couldn't take that job. And you can see Dabo Swinney actually ends up being the one who replaces me at Penn State as well. So that's going to give Penn State a pretty good chance, hopefully, of being able to continue their success, as they're going to run a pistol offense. So we'll see what happens there. And you can look at our offensive coordinator is going to be Philip Montgomery, who was formerly the head coach of Tulsa. And then our defensive coordinator is going to be Ken Wilson, who was the head coach in Nevada before he got fired after last season. So we'll have to see what we can build around as a team. This year, I'm not going to use the defensive coordinator's playbook. I'm going to use the playbook I want to use. That right there is going to be one of the only times I do that, and in the future I'll likely use my defensive coordinator's playbook. But for my first head coaching job, I want to control as much as I can control, so I'm going to do that to start out, and then my roots as an offensive coordinator I'll eventually have to take over to where we run my playbook on offense and whoever my defensive coordinator's playbook is on defense. As you see me filling out the coaching tree real quick, I put everything into recruiting because that's really the only way I can think to improve the Gators. There's no way this team finished 3-9 and it has a bunch of talent stacked away for us to use. So I feel like the only way to get better is to make sure I can get every recruit that I want, and hopefully in a year or two we'll be fantastic. Now, I will say that the Gators have a pretty good quarterback on their roster right now that Coach Billy Napier recruited. His name's Jack Garola, so we'll have to see what we can do with him and hopefully develop him. Now we're gonna take a look at the players leaving screen. The only player that's transferring away is Jack Miller III. He's a junior redshirt quarterback who's an 80 overall, and he's been the backup for the Gators, so it makes sense that he would transfer away. Now let's take a look at our players from Penn State. Players that are declaring early are Olu Fashanu, Kalen King, Curtis Jacobs, Kobe King, and Tyler Warren. That's a pretty big long list, and there's a lot of good players on there that are going to be going to the draft early, and that makes sense. They all had fantastic seasons. Now, some of the players that are transferring and following me to Florida are Malik Mega and Harrison Wallace III. They're the only two that made sense for me to bring from Penn State to Florida. I really wanted Bo Pribula, however, he didn't make a lot of sense just because because we already had a quarterback on the roster, so he transferred away to Arkansas. And then another big player that I was interested in, but we still have great players on Florida's roster, was Kayvon Lee. So he ended up going to Vanderbilt, so we will see him next season for sure. And then we also had a backup left tackle transfer. You know, he wasn't an impact player for us. However, McKinley Lewis is a true freshman, so he's going to go somewhere and develop, and maybe we'll see him grow into an NFL player someday. He ended up going to Toledo. Now, I'm showing off a bunch of players here in the background. I just like to keep this included so we know who they are and in real life where some of them players went. There wasn't a whole lot of transfers, surprisingly, I thought. It's been pretty interesting to see some of these players go pro. Like, I didn't expect Tyler Warren to go pro. He had a good season, but it shocked me a little bit when he went pro, and I think that's going to hurt Penn State quite a bit. They lost a lot of talent on defense to the draft early, so we'll have to see how they respond, and we're going to keep track of them even though I'm at Florida. I look forward to growing our Florida team and getting some storylines going with them because I plan on being there for a good minute, 5, 6, 7 years, and then maybe I'll move on. As we take a look at some of the O-line transfers, there really wasn't that many impacts, and then players going pro. I'm pretty sure Chris Jenkins is actually the son of the former NFL player Chris Jenkins. And then looking at the transfers here at linebacker, we had Capri Simmons of Maryland transferring to Louisiana Lafayette. He has good size at 6'6", 271, so we'll see what happens there. At defensive tackle, Jonathan Brown left SMU to go to Mississippi State. He's a 68 overall, and that's a transfer up, so we'll see if that helps his development. Spence Jones left Missouri to go to Air Force, and then Michael Markham left South Carolina to go to Appalachian State. We'll see if that helps him develop at all. Now at the middle linebacker spot, there's a whole ton of players declaring from that position. That's going to be stacked with young people. Mark Booty is one of the transfers from the middle linebacker position. He's going to go from Miami to Ole Miss. And then Nate McRae is the other one. He's going from Miami of Ohio to Rutgers, so that's going to be a step up for him. And then at the right outside linebacker position, we had Willie Mack Jr. going from Cal to Fresno State. That might help him develop as he should get plenty of playing time there. And then Jeff Shedd from UTEP to Colorado. That's a step up. However, Colorado's kind of terrible. As you've seen, they fired Deion Sanders after 2 seasons, which I don't think will happen at all in real life. Now you're going to see that we didn't have really a whole ton of other transfers. At corner there was, and we accepted both Harrison Wallace III and Malik Mega into our team. Now you're taking a look at some of the points we have out there on players. I'm not going to go real in depth just because I don't think it makes sense to. I didn't have any previous connection to these players. However, we did get David Hester, who is an athlete, and Nathan Osborne at outside backer. We lost Austin Jones, who we went after to Notre Dame, and Noel Dukes to Tennessee. Tackle depth is always good, especially on a team that really lacked it when I looked at the roster. So I was hoping to get some O-line help. However, I kind of swung and missed on the big ones. So that's going to be one of my primary focuses in our first season of recruiting, is just upgrading our depth on this team. That's a real big issue with the Florida Gators. And now we're going into position changes, and you can see David Hester, as we scroll through, looks like a wide receiver, and I think that's where he's going to end up. He doesn't show any potential on defense, so ultimately I end up landing on wide receiver, where he's an 80 overall and he'll make a big impact for us. Now we're just looking at the roster and seeing who's here and seeing what we might want to do for the future. Like I said, we have some pretty good halfback depth. That's why we didn't take Kayvon Lee. At receiver, now we have Xavier Henderson, who I thought about cutting from the team or transferring because in real life he went to Cincinnati, but I figured, you know what, he's on the team, we're in a video game world, he can stay here for his senior season and then he'll be gone. We don't really have a whole lot of talent besides the other 2 that I brought into this team. Hopefully I can grow and develop talent at receiver. It's important to have good receivers in my offense, as I like to throw the ball a lot and really trust them to win. As we're looking at the O-line, you can see the depth just is not there. We have a good backup center who might even slide out and play guard for us. I didn't move his position because of how much his overall would have gone down. However, you look and see he was going to lose 4 points just to change his position, which was pretty steep to me. It didn't make sense. I mean, center to guard isn't that big of a transition, but you know what? We decide ultimately as a sophomore, he can stay at center as his listed position and we can play him at guard if we choose. Now, I don't think I'm actually going to do that this year. I want to play some of the young guys and try to develop this team a little bit and maybe improve. But we'll see. We have a lot of somewhat decent players on defense. We don't have a lot of high overalls. However, we have a lot of mid-80s playing for us. So there is a chance that we could be decent this year. I think we could win some games. The problem is I think we're going to struggle to win the big games. And I think that we're going to be a relatively average team. But we'll see. Like I said, we have a lot of mid-80s talent on defense, so that should help us be decent, and we're not playing a whole lot of true freshmen there. Now, our O-line does concern me, but that kind of is what it is. Now, the next thing we're going to do is take a look at the upgrades in the offseason. I'm finishing scrolling through the roster just to show you everybody. Next year, I probably won't do that, but as you look at development, we ended up getting just 5 players into the 90s, and one of them is our punter, so that's not really good. We are average at best. We got +1 for Jack Garola. Xavier Henderson got +4 into the 90s. Harrison Walsh III is an 87, and so is Malik Meg. Well, Malik Mega's an 86, along with sophomore receiver Emmanuel Henderson. So we did get some development at receiver, which is good. I like to see that, and I could really use that for our future. Now we're taking a look at Bo Pribula. He got +1 up to an 83 at Arkansas. I hope we get to see him and maybe play him, see what happens with his career. As we take a look at Penn State, Drew Aller went up 4, Kyle Beach went up 5, which is pretty impressive. Nick Singleton went up 5, Katron Allen went up just 1, and then Nate Davis went up 5, whom we recruited but we never got to play with. At fullback, Greg Smith improved. He went up 3 to an 82 overall. So Penn State still should have a pretty elite offense. I'm curious to see what Dabo does with it and how much he changes it, and if they're going to run the ball more or maybe throw it more. They still have strong receivers. As you can see, Caden Saunders improved by 4. So did Avery DeWalt on Dejo and Liam Clifford. You had Amari Evans go up by 6 up to an 84, and then Keandre Lambert Smith improved by 3, and he's a 90. So they should be able to sling that ball all over the yard up there. They still have a great tight end in Theo Johnson as well. He improved by 3, and he's up to an 89 overall. Now, they also have an 87 overall tight end as well, so they should be okay. Taking a look at our team and our development, I'm just going to scroll through and show them off a little bit. You can see ETN, it says -2. However, you're going to see his overalls a little higher. They have his speed and agility ratings really low, and I'm not a scout, but he is definitely not an 84 speed player. If you watch him in real life, he could burst and pull away from people. He's not as quick as his brother, but he's still a talented athlete, so I think they just kind of hit him too harsh in this mod, so I decided to go ahead and up his speed and stuff a little bit. His speed and agility, I think, were the two things that went up a little bit. I'm not going to make him a 99. He's not the fastest guy on the field, but he's also not, with an 84 speed, you're talking like he's going to run a 4.6 or a 4.7. That to me is just a little ridiculous and way too low for a guy like that. I'm also showing this view off just because I think it's a little bit cleaner and what people are used to seeing. So I also want people to start to grow attached to these players and see their faces. And with the Dynasty tool, you can't see their faces. So I wanted to show them off in here again. This is all part of building a connection. The next thing we're doing is adjusting our conferences based upon what happened in the standings. Teams that went up and down are going to be adjusted and moved around. You'll see the final results here. I will say next season, I'm not going to show off me actually moving them. I'm just going to adjust the conferences and show each conference. I should have done that this year. However, I didn't think of it, and I showed all the movement. So it takes a little bit, and I'm not going to go step by step. I've talked about it, and I also believe I'm going to put out a graphic as well once this offseason's complete, showing what teams went where. Like I said, this dynasty has conference relegation, so teams that perform badly are going to go down. Independent's considered the lowest. CUSA is next on the list. After that's the Mountain West. After that is the Sun Belt, and then it's the MAC, and then the top one is the American. And the winner of the American has a chance to play a conference relegation bowl game every year, unless they are a playoff team. If they are a playoff team, they automatically are going to move up and take the place of a team in their region. So like I will use Tulane, who played in the relegation bowl last year and lost to Texas Tech. They could have gone to the Big 12 or the SEC. The SEC had a better team, finished last in their conference, so it was Texas Tech versus Tulane. Tulane ended up losing this game versus Texas Tech, so they didn't move up into the Power 5. Had they won, they would have taken Texas Tech's spot, and Texas Tech would have went back down to the American. So that's going to be a big part of this dynasty, and I'd like to see some teams advance up. However, I don't want it to become crazy, so I didn't want to pair the SEC with the Sun Belt and the ACC with the MAC, and I just didn't want to do that. I thought the best way to go about it was this way, and then we get the strongest teams in the Power 5, and hopefully we kind of create like super conferences in the Group of 5, where the American should be the strongest conference that's not in the Power 5, and which they are in real life. The Sun Belt's come a long way, but I'd still say it's the American. We'll We'll see how it plays out with all the changes this offseason. They stand a good chance of still being the best conference, and a lot of good teams move there for that reason. As we take a look at all the players, we're looking at just the top players at each position as we start recruiting, and it's going to give you an idea of some players who's on our board as well. I'm not going to go in depth because I'm going to do a recruiting episode here or there. There might be one, there might be two, and then when we go to signing day, I'm going to do an episode for that as well, now that I control the team and I know I'm staying here. One of the things that I really like to do is do some commits, and then there's going to be flips. So there might be players that I know committed elsewhere, but to you guys, I'm going to have them commit to Florida, and then come signing day, they're going to flip and put on a different hat. Or maybe a player that comes to Florida, I'm going to say they're committed to Ohio State, and then they're going to flip and come to Florida come signing day. It's just a way to keep it interesting, and it's something they don't have in the game anymore that I wish they did, just because that's realistic and that's what actually happens. I mean, you look at Jaden Rashada. He was a Gator, he signed his letter of intent, and then he left and went to Arizona State. So I just wish they kept that in the game. So since they didn't, I'm going to add some drama and do that to you guys, and we'll have to see if you guys can figure out who it is. Now I'm going to go through and show you all of our redshirt players. I'm just showing you the ones that I redshirted. Jason Marshall Jr. is probably the biggest one, and that's just because we are losing a lot of corners and he's low on the depth chart. Now taking a look at our schedule, we're going to open up against Oregon State, who dominated Florida in real life in the bowl game, and then next is Arkansas. So by pure luck, we're going to get to play Bo Pribula, and I'm excited for that one. That's going to be a big matchup, and I can't wait to take on Pribula. I wish him success at Arkansas, however, I don't wish him success against us. Next is Tennessee, and then we play Kentucky, and then we're going to play Louisiana Tech, and then we're also going to play LSU following that, which is our rival, so that's not shocking. And then it's Auburn, Georgia, Vanderbilt, with Kayvon Lee at halfback, by the way, so that's another one I look forward to playing. And then it's South Carolina and Alabama finishes our schedule. We have a pretty tough one this year, and I think we could start strong, and then I think we're going to flutter down the stretch. Arkansas is another team that wasn't very good, which is why Pribula went there. He was by far their best quarterback on the roster, so I think we could start pretty quick, and then we'll have to see what happens. Oregon State's ranked to begin the year, so that's going to be kind of tough on us, but I think we can beat them, and I do believe we're better than them, so there's a good chance that we could move up in the rankings, especially in the first half of the season. Then once we hit the second half of the season, I'm worried that that's where we're going to stall and start to drop as we hit the tougher opponents in there, and our team, could face some injuries. So if that happens, we're also going to be a little weaker because our depth is not good, as I mentioned earlier in this video. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm scrolling through looking to see where we're ranked right now, and I mean, it's sad. Vanderbilt's 53. They're ranked higher than us in the SEC. That's kind of embarrassing. I never would have guessed that. And I mean, they're higher in Mississippi State, so that's even kind of shocking when you look at it. But we're down to 70, and we're still not on this list yet. We come in at 71. Now the thing is, we're a B+ team, so we're not terrible. It's a lot like Penn State, where we're actually pretty good. We're just not great. We have a lot of mid-tier talent, and we're lacking in the high-end talent. So we'll have to see what happens there and see if we can overcome that this season and maybe be able to survive and let the sum be better than the parts. Because if that happens, we're going to be a really good team. However, if we need that star talent to emerge, we're going to be in trouble. We just don't have it. And that's something that I really think that could hurt us. And that's what I think could stop us from being a possible title contender this season. However, I'm not going to stress it. It's season 1. We got time. I don't anticipate us getting fired early in this one. I think we have time at Florida. I think we'll win enough games to be able to start and develop our team and not get fired after one season. We're looking at conference standings real quick. That's just to see where they predict everybody to go. That's something I'm going to always show off at the beginning of the season, so that way I have a reference point for how the season's going compared to what they thought. Because this is kind of the only way you can do it, is look in the preseason and see what they predict to have happen. Right now they predict Ole Miss and Alabama to be your top teams in the SEC, which is shocking. And in the Sun Belt, they predict Notre Dame to be the champion, which is who I thought would win it last year. I was quite surprised that they didn't. However, this year should be their year. They're significantly better than everybody there. We'll see what happens. In the Atlantic of the ACC, they predict Florida State to come out on top, and Clemson's so low on this list, I'm shocked by it. In the Coastal, they think it's going to be Miami, who does have a pretty good team, so we'll see if that's what ends up coming to fruition. In the American, they predict USF to win this first division, which is a little bit shocking. I would not have guessed that. And then UAB on the other side. They don't think Tulane's going to be able to follow it up with a victory. In fact, they think they're going to drop to 3 behind Northern Illinois, who moved up from the MAC. We'll have to see if that's what ends up happening. This is a pretty interesting battle because they'll have a chance to move to the Power 5 if if they can win this conference. ECU's predicted to win the first division of the Big 12. I mean, they do have a really good team, so it wouldn't shock me at all. Hopefully Texas Tech can improve so they don't face elimination again. And then the shocking thing is Kansas State on the other side, followed by Kansas. Who would have ever guessed that? I know I wouldn't have. In the Big 10 East, they predict Ohio State to win it over Penn State. I'm rooting for Penn State, though. I got to pull for my boys. I hope they can find a way to do it and come out on top. They still have USC winning the West, and they have UCLA at number 2. They're not giving a lot of respect to the teams that are already in the Big 10, and I honestly don't really blame them. In the CUSA, they have North Texas coming out on top and trying to move up. Army moved up from independent status to CUSA, so we'll see if maybe they can move through the ranks pretty quickly. I just left them as an independent just because they were the worst independent on the list when I started out. It's nothing against Army. I hope they move up and do well. For the independents, the only one we have is La Tech, and they can move back up to the CUSA if they find a way to win more games than the worst team in the CUSA, which should be pretty easy as an independent. Next up, we're going to look at the MAC standings. Right now in the MAC East, they have Miami of Ohio winning it, and then they have Louisiana, who just moved up from the Sun Belt, winning the MAC West. We'll have to see if that comes true and if they end up moving up. And then Texas State, who moved down from the Americans and dead last there. In the Mountain West, they have UTEP, who won the Sun Belt, predicted to win the whole thing. We'll see if they can do it and move up. I kind of hope to see some Western teams move up, and I thought about randomizing the beginning starting points just so that way it wasn't so hard for the Pac-12 to be adjusted. Speaking of the Pac-12, you have Washington expected to win the North, which wouldn't be shocking. They went undefeated until the playoffs last season. And then in the South, it's Utah on top. So I can't wait to get this season going for you guys. So please like and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. This is LDJ11. I'm out. I'll be back with more Coach KJ soon.
And sometimes you just gotta believe there's something that'll give you relief. There's something that'll have what you need, what you need. We're broken, it's tragic, we're not all elastic, but maybe there's magic, believe you could have it.